It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 454. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hi.
So, as is often the case after we take a week off, we've got a pretty full plate of topics.
Gasp.
So, Tuesday before last, a new Diablo IV season started, and I thought since I got the game for free, I might as well check it out because they had some massive patch notes going into this one.
Although I guess they're like letting people play for free right now.
Yeah, like Xbox and on Battle.net, you can play for free.
I think so, yeah.
So, like, the game at launch was disappointing, and I've talked about that at length. Season 1 was also kind of disappointing and didn't really do anything. But Season 2 has been a massive difference in the way that the game plays. And I don't know if it was just the balance changes they made, or if it's the fact that the seasonal mechanics are real powerful. A lot, like, it's the Season of Blood, and a lot of the vampire powers involve giving you life back while dealing damage. You know, traditional vampire, affixes in games. So you have quite a bit of sustain as a result, but you're also dealing quite a bit of damage. So I don't like it's like the game is suddenly fun. Things don't take forever to die. You can kind of rip through things pretty quickly. The seasonal mechanic added this new area that's basically just green Helltide, where it's a zone on the map that's got lots of vampires, and you kill the vampires to complete quests for the Tree of Whispers, and also like get juice to power up your vampire powers, and it happens like it's an hour long, and when it's over, it moves to another zone instead of being down for another hour that you have to wait on like Helltides are. So there's always this thing that you can go do. So that alone helped it immensely. And also they greatly increased the occurrence of Legion events, which are like, go fight a bunch of demons in this area and get some prizes, and they reward a lot of experience. I've started to peter out, and I think I'm around 84, but I had zero trouble getting through all of the gates to get to World Tier 4 and get geared. And mostly why I'm slowing down is I've only found one kind of content that can actually give me upgrades, and it's the stupid world bosses that still spawn like every 4 or 5 hours. So like,
So it sounds like new systems are good, but the old systems that are not better.
Yeah, they did nothing to improve a lot of the old systems. So like the big changes are legions are much better. Legions happen every 15 minutes or so. And also here's this zone that is just mayhem, free for all, really high density of mobs, also rewards lots of loot. You can spawn mini bosses on demand. So like there's this area of the game where you can just run amok and get prizes. And I chose correctly when it came to leveling, because a lot of the leveling guides are like, just run the beginning of this one dungeon over and over and over and keep resetting it. And I didn't want to do that. That sounds like
annoying.
A bad idea. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just did the vampire zone, which is stupid amounts of experience, and also leveled up my vampire powers. And once I got 5 of them to level 3, it was real powerful. And like one of them is just, it deals damage based on your current health to everything on the screen. That one is a little out of band because it can one-shot like random bats and, the lowest tier of monsters that you fight. If it fires when you're at full health, and it can fire off anything. It can fire off mounting your horse. It can fire off dismounting your horse. It can fire off looting a chest. You taking any action and you've not fired off one of these for 4 minutes or 4 seconds, fires off another one. So obviously when you have like a huge group of players together, they're constantly like draining health from the minions. So like it's dumb. It's fun. It's probably a step too far, but I do think like a lot of the power is from this stupid borrow power system. And the game itself, like it feels like there's a lot more build diversity available right now than there ever has been. Cause like every class has 4 or 5 builds that are pretty strong, that are viable to fight, all of the content and, the level 100 bosses and all that stuff. So they've done a good job of moving the needle forward, but they still need to like fix the fact that there's really no end game. Once you hit level 70, you essentially have as good a gear as you're ever going to get, and you can kind of do everything in the game.
What do you mean by there's no end game? Like there's no grind up to...
There, like at level 70, you have access to everything in the game.
Okay.
That you're ever going to have access to.
Yeah, but so like isn't that also basically true of Path of Exile?
I mean, sort of, but it feels like there's systems within systems where you do this content to get this thing so you can do a different kind of content. Like, there's a lot of,
there's a big end game grind.
Right. There's a lot of layers of end game in Path of Exile. Nightmare dungeons still are not good. Like, they're not fun. I feel like someone was given the task of retrofit Mythic Plus from WoW into Diablo. Because they've got the same, here's a bunch of negative affixes, but you've got like one positive, and now run this dungeon. And they tried to reroute the dungeons, but there's still a lot of, okay, we're going to need you to go down this tunnel to go kill this thing that's off the main path so that you can move forward on the main path. And all of the mechanics that these nightmare dungeons have are more just annoying than they are hard. They're like fun killers. So like there's this little snowflake that follows you around, and I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it looks like a snowflake. And it moves around kind of slowly. And every so often it stops and it puts up a shield. So you have to find where the hell your snowflake stopped and get into the shield in about 4 or 5 seconds, because it's going to nuke you. And if you're not in the shield, you get nuked. And it's not a difficult mechanic. It's just like, it's like the worst escort quest ever, that you have to pay attention to where this stupid thing went so that you can find it to get under the bubble. Like there's another one where it spawns a blood blister randomly, and you need to find it and kill it before it nukes you. Well, like that's fine, but also like if you're trying to play with 2 people, and if they've at all split up, it's, oh God, where did the blood blister spawn? Which one of us has it? And can I get it killed after I realize where the hell it's at? Because it's just going to nuke you. Or every elite pack spawns with a suppressor mob, which means you just have to kill that mob before you can really kill any of the other mobs. But it's just annoying. Like it's not a bad thing. It's just annoying. So I mean, like,
that mechanic can be good if clearly communicated.
It's clear enough communicated, but it just breaks up the flow of the map. to where you're always just kind of waiting on the mechanic to move forward so that you can do something again.
Well, when you were talking about the most annoying escort, I was like, Bell loves Delve, though.
You can make the bear go wherever you want him to go. Sorry, I have a bear. I don't have a cart.
That does improve things.
The
So
bear is
just having
much
a bear.
better.
The bear goes on its path.
Right, but like...
Yeah, but you don't need to care about it very much. You can go ahead of it. It doesn't require you to take care of it.
Yeah, like
You can do
the
delve
bear,
at an
the
extremely
bear can't be
rapid
killed.
pace.
It just does its thing. You don't have to worry about protecting it.
Yep, it's amazing.
You just have to be close enough that you get light.
Right, and like, again, this goes back... We were talking about this before the show about how to find walls to break. Well, like, delve paths are kind of predictable as well, so like you can tell where the bear's gonna go. And if you rush to the station, it will hurriedly speed up to catch up.
I understand what you're saying, but like at this point, that is like I don't know where the bear is gonna go.
Right, like it's something you learn over time. Anyway, like,
but also, yes, presentation is important because we're going to probably talk about another escort quest-like mechanic later on in the show.
Okay. Anyway, like season 2, pretty good. Like I'll probably play season 3. We'll see if they continue to steadily, incrementally improve that game. It's maybe salvageable. CitizenCon.
Oh boy.
Like lots of stuff came out of this one.
Yeah, so
Tam, did you hold the line?
they have the most stunningly memeable like catchphrases. The last one was "Answer the Call," 2016.
That was the last time they did this?
Yeah, kinda. So this is Star Citizen, and Star Citizen has a reputation. And I'm not going to say it's not well earned, but it's also a function of, like, they're doing a bunch of things that any experienced producer or, like, game investor would tell you not to do. And mostly the reason that people would tell you not to do these things, like, and to give you, to provide a few concrete examples, it's like, hey, do you want to vastly inflate the budget requirements and time requirements of your game? Make another game in your game. Like, and people do this all the time. Like, oh, hey, what if our driving, what if our open world driving game had on foot combat? Cool. You've just made another game in your game.
Yeah. Right. Black Flag, ship to ship combat.
Exactly. Like, and it's the kind of thing that you can do in a sequel because you've already made the game. You can make another game in the game.
Yeah.
But like, to start with that is a bit much. And it's especially fraught when you're talking about space games. Because if you're walking around on foot, that's a game. If you're walking around on foot doing combat, that's also a game. Like, those are not the same game. That's a different set of inputs. That's a different set of interface requirements. It's one of the reasons that you don't see big open world wander around and like read people's mail segments in Call of Duty. Because they're only making one game. And
the thing is like games that do this traditionally suffer from fidelity loss. Like the mechanic is kind of hollow if you're doing a bunch of these different things in the same game.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to people who are like, I don't actually like GTA games because half of the game feels janky and bad. If you're ever doing a mission and you have to get out and shoot your gun, it's janky and bad, and has been for a really long time. Like, it's better now, but yeah, a space game is like, you want to walk around on foot? That's a game. You want to walk around and shoot people on foot? That's a game. You want to drive a vehicle on the ground? That's a game. You want to fly a vehicle? That's at least one game.
Yeah, whereas Star Citizen is basically just Hubris the video game.
Yeah, I mean, Star Citizen is stacking, hey, what if you also had a physics... What if you also had like a real-time physics sim interspersed between all of these games? How about a, cargo a cargo and trade simulator. That's a game. It's like game after game after game after game after game. So yeah, they're building like, at last count, it's like 12 games in their game.
You talked about how when they added Mario Kart, that was basically like a full game.
Yeah, like they just added Mario Kart and racing. Like that could be a game itself. There are entire games that are just that, and it's not just racing. It's like on the ground racing and in space racing and in atmosphere flight racing, which has different mechanics. Like you can go down just an infinite rabbit hole, and they've been doing this. The big like, oh, Star Citizen is a scam. Dates originally back to, it was supposed to be a single player game, basically a modern Freelancer. Freelancer was a single player game where you could connect with some friends and fly around their open world universe without any of the story missions, because there was enough there that you could have fun with it. And that was the original Star Citizen vision. So they got it all started, and they had some like licensing agreements and so forth to build that game. And then their funding went bananas. And they're like, well, what if we made it a whole MMO? Which, cool, except they ran into some problems because that's not what they licensed their engine for. So they're legally obligated to make the single player game as well, which is what they've been doing in parallel with the MMO. And unlike 38 Studios, it's a shockingly good faith effort to do this thing that's nonsense. And mostly they have the most pointlessly transparent messaging in video games. They tell you all about weird development stuff, and people deeply misunderstand it, and they're like, oh, you canceled my favorite ship, as they try to pin them to promises that they made 12 years ago. But what I find fascinating is I've worked in games, and especially MMO development, for long enough that I've seen the arc of these the arc of development. And there's a reason that most games don't show you anything until they're like 80 to 90% finished. Like, you don't even, for the most part, other than maybe if you're really on top of things, you'll see a like announcement that a studio is hiring for an unknown project. Like, that's maybe what you've heard, and people will speculate about that. But like, actual public announcements don't happen until the game is like 80 to 90% done, usually. And if it looks like it's less than 80 to 90% done, that's generally a careful fabrication.
Managing some hype cycle.
Yeah. And, as much fun as it is to have a game announced and be like, hey, it's coming out next month, it's actually not necessarily the best, because it means that you have a really short window for people to hear about your game, which is actually really important if you want to be successful. And so the more reliant you are on a lot of people all playing your game at once, the less likely you're going to have that kind of announcement.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that you wait that long is because games look like ass for the vast majority of their production cycle. Like, the memes are all over the internet, but like, that huge chasm of what am I doing with my life? Have I shackled myself to a total failure of a project, like game dev thing, is true for basically every game. Like, games just feel like they're going to be disasters for huge parts of their life cycle. And it's usually because there's like back-end engineering or back-end systems or whatever that once they all click and turn on, then you have, game loops and player motivations and visuals and so forth. It's like, everything is just gray people walking around in T-poses because we don't have texture mapping online and we don't have our animation suite plugged in yet. And then suddenly, hey, this week we have textures and animation plug in, and the game goes from looking like, worse than your average student project to a nearly professional, release. And it's just like, I mean, these things happen overnight sometimes, which is absolutely bonkers to think about. But it's just like, hey, this patch, this internal update basically patches out over whatever file sharing thing you've got, and you sync, and suddenly you open your engine, and you're like, oh wow, this looks like a video game. Star Citizen is going to be no different. It's actually more of a game than I would expect for how much of its development still needs to be done. Possibly because they've put lots of carts before a lot of horses, which slows things down a lot. If you need to make your game, one of the biggest things that I used to remember from console games is the idea that you need to make a beautiful corner, where it's like, hey, let's build out the entire game in like one little portion of one tiny section of a level, so that you can show executives who don't really understand what a game looks like in production something that they can latch onto and say, oh yeah, that's cool, let's give you more money. And they're miserable. They're like miserable to put together. They're important, vitally important to put together because it's how you get funded, but they're miserable to put together because you're just it's just this totally artificial thing that you're hacking together because your systems aren't in place, but you need to make them look like they're in place enough to convince somebody else that they will be.
Right. I mean, and like anybody who's done any actual alpha testing understands this sequence, because you end up testing the exact same area forever because it's the only area of the game that's like viewable.
Yeah. And then and so like Star Citizen, and I remember at one point we had to do a yearly exec review, basically, which required an updated slice, and that needed to happen twice yearly. They had a twice a year check-in, and the setup to put that together required about half the team for about 8 weeks.
So not very efficient use of resources.
Yeah, you could do the math there and be like, you're spending a hideous amount of time doing these mock-ups, basically, that you can't skip, but boy, that's not helping you, move the game forward.
Well, like, I've always been scared to show the client anything because, like, it's real easy to throw together something that looks like a piece of software, but doesn't do anything yet.
Yeah.
But like, you don't know what problems you're going to run into between making the thing that looks like a completed application actually do things. Like, you may have to scrap half of it. Who knows? Yeah.
I mean, that's the other reason you don't publicly show your stuff until it's nearly done, because by then what the end result is going to be. Usually because you're locked in hard enough that you can't really pivot at that point. So I say all of this about the beautiful corner and so forth, a term that I can't stand. Star Citizen has been doing that as a live service since like 2015, since they launched the original hangar module, which really was just letting you walk around a hangar and look at the ships that they put in the game totally statically. That's still a lot of effort in that early of production that they just had to keep online and keep updating and keep patching and keep working for random players to mess around in, rather than having it be piloted by a dev who knows where all of the mines are placed and can deftly avoid hitting any of them to make it look great. So they've been doing that for, like, again, the better part of a decade. So yeah, of course the game is developing real slowly. And the big promise is, at some point there's a tipping point where you go from, is this even a video game, to, wow, I can't believe the speed of these updates. And the promise with Star Citizen has always been, at some point you're going to hit that and you're going to be surprised how much happens how quickly. And it's been exacerbated by Squadron 42, which is their first-person game. They took a vote in 2014 or something that was like, hey, we could tell you all about the development, or we could keep it spoiler-free so that it's a surprise when you play it. And they've stuck to the vote, which was keep it spoiler-free. So it's just been a complete development black box. So the big thing for CitizenCon this year was them showing off a big trailer of cutscenes and gameplay and stuff we've never seen in Squadron 42 and saying, hey, it's feature complete. And feature complete that's a development term that has meaning. That means that all of the systems and content that you're planning on putting in the game are in, and now what's left is bug fixing and like polish.
Yeah.
And that can take a while, but that's the point where it's like, oh, this is a video game. We have crossed the point where we have now made a video game, and now we want to make it shine.
Yeah. Solve that one weird shader or that clipping texture or
yeah. Hey, let's make all of the plants not clip through the walls, like make grass not come up through the floor, that kind of stuff. And that's a big deal. Because you don't need you potentially don't need a lot of your full team to do that. And the promise again has always been, hey, when you have those people from the single player game, when they're done with their work there, they will bring all of that work to Star Citizen the MMO.
Right.
And so that's like a big, people are excited. And then were that not enough? Like that had sort of leaked a little bit, so people were buzzing pretty excitedly when they saw some of that. The other thing that they've been waiting on is Star Citizen has one star system. And because everything is running on a single server, it's like a single static server instance. They can't add that much more to it because it just collapses under its own weight. They need to parcel it out. So they're basically trying to get that tech online so that they can make more star systems. And they've been teasing the next star system for years now. They are starting testing in 3 days for it. Their big announcement was, yep, we've got the next star system. You'll be able to play it in a test form October 31st, which is a big, tangible thing that was surprising. People were basically like, yeah, we're gonna see an announcement that early 2024 it'll start testing. And it was a full 5-6 months before that we're actually seeing anything. And there was just a lot of really good seminars that were talking about game design in a thoughtful, long-term sort of way. How they're adjusting the way they're handling things based on what they've seen from players and how they know that players will react to one particular issue or another. And that's really good to see because it's a big concern that I've had. Can you actually deliver on these promises when, you seem to think that players want to have open world PvP all the time? And there's that piece of it. But the other piece of it is every CitizenCon for the last, since I've been following it, has basically been, hey, here, check out some cool things that might be coming soon, in the next few years. And also, hey, here's some new ships. Buy these ships. Check out these cool new ships we've made. Buy them. They'll be ready at some point.
You like MTX? Here's some MTX.
Here's some more MTX. Let's get real excited about the MTX. We're going to take up 50 to 60% of the show.
Runway.
They did release new ships. One of them they released straight to flyable, as in here's a new ship that you can fly right now. And the other one was like, we will have this within the next year. It will be delivered in the next year. Also, our theme for the entire show is the goal is everything you've seen in the show today and yesterday, you will be able to experience in the game within a year, which is a bold claim because they had some stuff. I was about to say, it is a bold claim because one of the things they showed off was base building, their player housing functionality. But they've also avoided making any kind of claim like that for, 5 years at least. And that's, and also the new MTX stuff was 30 minutes of one day was the duration that they spent on it. And of that 30-minute duration, half of it was them talking about their development pipeline and how they were updating it to be able to address their backlog of concept ships, which is also a big problem they've got, where they've sold these concept ships that will be coming out eventually, and some of them have been languishing for years. Like, where's this ship I want to play? But so in between seeing like, hey, here's engineering gameplay, which looks incredible. Here's
Yet another game.
Yeah, which is yet another game. Like their engineering gameplay looks like FTL. It's got a little console that brings up an FTL like interface. So it's like, hey, we've got engineering, we've got base building, we've got this new system coming out, we've got new portions of our the way we're building our ship pipeline, and all of it is supposed to be happening within a reasonable timeline. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about it, that actually gives me some faith that it's not just them blowing smoke, is how much they basically said they've been talking about resource management. Their engineering gameplay has been called resource management. And I didn't really understand why until I saw that it is basically a system that they're abstracting to fit into 5 or 6 other systems. It's the same underlying backbone that determines your buildings and power management and so forth on your base, as it does on your ship, as it does for like intra-system communications networks. It's just all using the same underlying backbone, which is the kind of reuse that you've got to do if you're actually going to ship anything. So, I mean, it's super
considering
promising.
their previous tendency to simulate everything.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of that was I think the most for me like, from the game dev angle, like the thing that I was most interested in was seeing them very frankly talk about asset reuse and systemic reuse and getting more efficient with their how they use and interpret their systems so that they can actually build any of these things, which is not something they've ever really talked about before. It's been bespoke this and bespoke that for forever. So it was a shocking CitizenCon to finish. It's probably going to lead into one of their best, big November events ever. Their trailer is making the rounds, and they've got to prove it out. They've got to prove it out over the next year, obviously, but also they've released 3 times as many patches this year as last year, and they're fairly meaty, like new missions, new areas, modernizing a bunch of old stuff to new standards. It's going to be really interesting to see. I think it's entirely possible that next year is the big year. I ultimately think that Star Citizen ends up landing like Warframe, where Warframe is like, yeah, we're technically still in beta. We're just not wiping anymore. And I suspect Star Citizen ends the same way.
Yeah, I feel like Star Citizen has been in that mode for a while now. Like
they still wipe though, so like it's hard for them to say that.
I guess that's fair. It's much more playable. Like it's still buggy, but like it's a very eminently playable game.
Yeah, the fact that one of the other things that they've been emphasizing over the last several patches is their new player experience, which now has a tutorial. And they're talking about expanding their tutorial. And their tutorial is actually good. It teaches you about almost every core game system that you need to know. And so it's easy to be skeptical because of how long the process has been taking. But when they actually deliver, it's usually pretty impressive.
Okay, Kodra, what is the Wonder Seed Powers topic?
It's Mario Wonder.
Oh, okay, I'm with you now.
I just every single time it goes, I'm like, oh, Wonder Seed Power, activate.
Okay, look, y'all play with randomizers in various games, so for all I know, it was one of those topics.
No, Mario Wonder came out within the past couple of weeks, and we haven't really talked about it.
Feels like what you might get if you put a randomizer onto some things.
Oh, it's true. And it's real good. It's a very fun Mario game. Its controls feel pretty great. I love all of the new power-ups. I am not good at bubble jumping, but maybe I'll learn.
That feels like its own giant pit of learning, I guess.
It sure is. But Yeah, Mario's back. They're not in the Mushroom Kingdom. They're in the Flower Kingdom. And it's just like the Mushroom Kingdom. There's all of these poplins, and they've chosen someone of a completely different origin to be their ruler.
Clearly, that's how you do.
Like, the poplins are just like toads, except instead of mushrooms on their head, they have flowers that bloom if you water them or get them excited. Anyways, yes, you have Prince Florian, who is, I'm gonna say, a baby wiggler.
He looks kind of like a caterpillar. He does still have a flower on his head, but it's not nearly as big as the poplins.
It's true. That flower is important because you can install a badge there, and that changes the way your character plays, which can be anything from a whole bunch of characters. You've got Mario, Luigi, Peach, Daisy, 2 different colors of Toad, yellow Toad, blue Toad, and then pink Toadette. You can also be 4 different colors of Yoshi and Nabbit. The Yoshis and Nabbit are like the assist mode. They don't take damage from enemies, and the Yoshis can do a bunch of things like flutter in the air.
And eat enemies.
But they don't get to use power-ups. So the power-ups are really fun. There's the classic returns. The Super Mushroom makes you large. The Fire Flower gives you Fire Flower, and then you have 3 new ones. The Elephant Apple, which turns you into a giant elephant. And you can go through blocks with ease, you can smash things with your trunk, and you can suck up water and spray water out of your trunk.
You are also, interestingly, 2 blocks wide as an elephant.
You are.
Yes. Which has weird interactions.
Yeah, very weird implications.
It definitely has that, because like you can run over a 2 block wide gap. I'm not sure what other implications that has.
Mostly when smashing things.
Oh, okay.
Either from below or above.
Right. That would make sense. Your bubble allows you to bubble enemies. It's very powerful. It goes through walls. And you can jump off of your bubble. So you can shoot a bubble out and then jump off of it. Or if you're extremely good, you can just constantly be running and like press the bubble chute right before you do your jump. And then if you time a bubble as you land on another bubble, you basically have flight. This is a speedrun trick, and it's very cool. There are certain auto-scrollers that you basically get to skip over using the bubble. But yeah, the game's really fun. I beat it today. And I got all 18. I got all of the Wonder Seeds from the special world, which means the only thing I have left to do is 100% the game and get to the final level, which is what happens in Mario games now.
Yep.
But there's also a Wonder Seed in every single level, which just completely changes. Like, the joke online is this is Mario doing some drugs. But like it definitely warps the level to make it do something differently. And it's like
really fun.
They're definitely playing with the concept of the like Mario level. There's some like very meta jokes of like, oh, I'm on this herd of buffalo. Oh, they just like knocked over the goalpost. I guess I'm not gonna get that goalpost. Or, hey, Mario is now like top down and is running along the background walls. Better keep an eye on where there are holes in the background wall. Oh, the enemies still interact with you from the foreground, though. So sometimes you're going to need to use them to open up a path.
Yeah, they've got some... The creativity in the levels is so impressive.
Yes.
The one of the things that I've always loved about Mario games is they're official Mario games with very few exceptions are not hard. They're not really made to be difficult games. They
Or at
can
least
be.
they're not hard to finish, to reach the ending of.
Yeah. If you want to beat a Mario game, it's not supposed to be that hard. And I think that's good. Because what they do, a lot of the level design, you got all these different ways of going through a level. And going through a level in a variety of different ways is fun. You not only get different, the potential for different exits and endings, but also you can just sort of wander, and wandering is interesting because they really like to throw weird little things that don't really matter. And they use those weird little things that don't really matter brilliantly to message the things that do matter. So you'll see, one of the things that you see relatively early on is a piranha plant. And you know piranha plants. You've seen them. They pop out of pipes, they chomp you, and they go back in the pipe. These ones don't. They'll hop out and run around.
This is like the second level in the game, just to let you know that things are going to be a little different now.
And the very first one you see is inaccessible.
Yes, it's on the ceiling.
It's on a ceiling. It hops out. It runs along the ceiling. It hops into another pipe and goes down. And we'll just do this repeatedly for as long as you watch it. And it's not impossible to get hit by it, but you have to be kind of trying. And it does such a good job of showing you, hey, enemies can behave differently from you. And these piranha plants are different from the ones like, hey, this is what a piranha plant does in this game. Also, that might be different from what you're used to. And also like, it's safe. You can watch what it does and interact with it as much or as little as you want to get what's happening here. And that's such a clever little piece of, just core functionality. Here's what you're able to do. Let's teach you how this game works in a totally functional way. And the whole game is like this. They have a lot of what you might call wasted space. From a pure efficiency standpoint, they have a ton of wasted space in their levels. And they use that space to put interesting little flavor pieces or just dial down the visual busyness if they need to, or use that to control level pacing.
Or to freaking hide secrets.
Or to hide secrets. All of which are great uses for that.
The other thing that they introduced in this game, which I was like, oh, whatever. This is such a throwaway concept. I don't really care. There are talking flowers. They put this in their advertisements. Like, why are you putting talking flowers? Those talking flowers are awesome. I love them. And
they're incredibly well thought out.
They are so well thought out. They are placed in all of these cool places. They are context sensitive. So like, there's an area in the background in one of the earlier screens, and the piranha plant, the talking plant is just talking flowers, just looking backwards and saying, "Huh, I wonder if you can get back there." And then there's a pipe that you can go through and like collect a 10 purple coins item, which is one of the collectibles in the game. And then when you go past the flower plant, he'll be like, "Oh, I guess you can go back there. Neat."
There's another one in the later level that if you come out the level in the relatively straightforward way, the flower's like, "Huh, why'd you come this way?"
Yup. Maybe letting you know there's a secret path out of here.
So Mario has the Dark Souls notes.
I have not played online because I was playing with my son.
I mean,
if
they were written by the developers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's what the flowers remind me of.
I feel like Mario also kind of has a Dark Souls-y thing going on where like you can see other ghosts.
You can, and you can actually help other people not die to pits.
It's true.
Or, be saved from dying in pits.
Drop a standee. I saw a video of somebody who beat Climb, Climb, Climb just with standees, and I thought that was brilliant.
The special version of that level?
Yes. Climb, Climb, Climb is the follow-up to Jump, Jump, or Jump, Jump, Jump. Which
I don't think the level was actually called Climb, 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 but that's basically what it is.
No, it's definitely called Climb, 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 and then it has the like, Fluff Puff Peaks special world.
Okay.
Yep. But there are music blocks that go to the beat of the song, And as the song progresses, the beat increases, and so like you're kind of like going from, oh, I can take my time, to, oh, I'm running and jumping and I'm trying to optimize everything I can do to beat this level. Climb, climb, climb is that, but instead of just doing jumps, you're doing like wall climbs.
It's almost all wall jumps.
It's almost all wall jumps. So it's a very vertical level. But those two levels were very challenging. I feel like Climb, Climb, Climb was the hardest special world level for me, which makes sense because it's the second special world level, as is tradition.
Yup. All the way back to Super Mario World.
Yeah,
Freaking tubular.
that second one in Super Mario World.
I mean, that's the only one of the special worlds that the name of it is burned into my brain.
Yep.
I got another one. I remember Outrageous. Outrageous is the one with the fire on the ground, which kills you for different reasons. It's got unkillable enemies in it.
Yep.
But this game, you were talking about the creativity on display. I think this game, I feel like people will say a lot of things about the new Soups games, like, oh, the physics is bad, or like, I just didn't. I think honestly, they just didn't have the creative spark that a new Mario game needed, and Wonder has that creative spark.
Yes.
I think the first game did. The one on the DS.
Yes.
I think then the series got stale after that.
I completely agree with Ash.
I've only played the one that you can get on the Switch, and that game felt stale.
It kind of was. They didn't really do anything interesting with it.
Yeah, it was just a bunch of Mario levels, but like not inspired Mario levels.
Yeah, there's no, like, it's hard to say Mario has a narrative in the way that you think about narratives, but it does. Like Mario World, you get a sense of the places that you're in, the worlds you're moving through. You know, Mario 3 originated this, and it's a really, really good model where all of these levels have this kind of theme to them, so they're more memorable. And Mario Wonder has that like spark again, it's really, really cool to see. I've been a little bit like underwhelmed by Mario games lately, just because I'm like, okay, you know, show me something that feels new and fresh. And I think that the creativity with the talking flowers is really great, and the badges are inspired. The idea, the badges, like I want to harp on that one because the badges are great. They basically say, okay, you have a limited number of buttons, just baseline. Mario, you only have so many buttons, and they don't really want to overload you. Like, there are platformers, of which I won't name names, where you basically have to start putting in order to increase the complexity and difficulty, you basically have to start putting in effectively fighting game combo tier commands in order to execute whatever thing it's asking you for.
You can call out Symphony of the Night, it's fine.
Symphony of the Night, Hollow Knight, Celeste, all of these games. Mario Wonder says, we know you want to do these things. We'll put that on a button, but we're going to make you choose which one you've got. So there's like a strategy layer that I've never seen before in this kind of game. Hollow Knight has a little bit of it with its own badges, but it's more of a build. It's not, you don't have the freedom to change it as often as you do in Mario Wonder. And like, crucially, every time you die in Mario Wonder, it gives you an opportunity to switch your badge in case you have the wrong badge on.
Oh, good.
And it also asks you when you go into a level. Some levels require a certain badge, and it'll automatically flip you to that badge.
Some levels actually have like recommended badges, like, hey, we think this level is very difficult if you aren't using this badge. There are also badges that are designed to, like, there are 3 different types of badges. There are action badges, which changes the way you move through the level. There are, I think they're called support badges, which for the most part just like either make it easier for you to find things, collect things, or to not die. Like there's literally a badge that's like, oh, were you gonna fall into a pit? You get a bounce the first time you would fall into a pit. And there's actually a level where they're like, this is the recommended badge for this level, and it's the recommended badge for a reason.
There's also some stuff that's like, you know, hey, did you not have a super mushroom at the start of this level? Have a super mushroom.
Yes.
I personally have found that one incredibly useful in some levels that are hard.
Yeah, like it's just a nice thing to have, because it reduces some of the like tedium, but it means that they can add a huge array of interesting special abilities without hideously overloading the actual play experience.
They also have expert badges.
Don't
one
use
of
these
which,
unless you really know what you're doing.
One of which is truly hilarious right now, because as one of the people speedrunning the game pointed out, it costs you about 2.5 minutes to get this badge. And if you're doing the game right, it saves you about 3 minutes. His comment, it saves you anywhere from 2.5 to 3 minutes. So there's currently some routing drama going on in the Wonder community, because what is the right route? The first expert badge you can get is Jet Run, which gives you insane amount of coyote time and also means that you just are always dashing forwards.
You can no longer stand still.
Oh my.
Yup.
Oh yeah, no, it's a choice.
The level that you get it actually forces it on you, so you need to learn how it works before they actually let you use it in other levels. But there's a reason for this.
There's a reason. When I say generous amounts of coyote time, I'm talking like 2 or 3 seconds of coyote time.
Like, we're not talking frames, we're talking seconds.
Yeah, you can cover about 10 body lengths running before you need to start thinking about jumping. It's enough that it actually was difficult for me to finish the level because I didn't trust it enough.
Same.
Yep.
But that kind of thing, it's really, I really appreciate how much, like, Mario has always, like, Nintendo in general has always been kind of obsessed with, we need to make sure that our games are accessible, and Mario Wonder is no exception. But unlike other Mario games that I've seen, like, actively discourage speedrunners and so forth in their construction, this one doesn't make itself less accessible in so doing. I also think that levels having difficulty stars is a very good idea.
Yes.
Like, you know,
so you can see in the first world that that level you're about to run into is not really on the critical path.
It's not on the critical path, and it's got 4 stars. So, like, are you getting frustrated losing to this level? Yeah, that I can understand. It's a really hard level. If you don't want to do this, there are other levels you can do.
You don't need to.
You don't need to.
Maybe don't, actually.
This game feels like it has... Unlike a lot of other Mario games, it feels like this game is made by people who have been influenced by people who have been influenced by Mario games. Because, like, it feels influenced by other platformers other than just Mario games. And it's taken a lot of those very interesting concepts that are out in the world and made them so accessible and so polished. And I love it.
Yeah, it's Nintendo. Nintendo is the best at what they do. And it's really easy to forget that they're the best at what they do until they come back with something like this to just remind you. Like, they really are just stunningly good at Mario games and platformers as a genre.
I know you were saying you haven't felt it in a while, but I feel like the last Mario game, which would be Bowser's Fury, was pretty good. But it's also just been forever since they've made a 2D Mario game.
Also true.
Yeah. Like, Bowser's Fury was pretty good. Bowser's Fury was, to back up a bit, the 3D Land 3D World series is a very, very weird mix of 3D Mario and 2D Mario design.
Yeah.
And I think Bowser's Fury was a very good execution of that in a slightly more understandable way.
I absolutely love 3D World, and it's probably one of I love Odyssey and the way you move in Odyssey, but I think I like the levels of 3D World more. But yeah, Wonder is very good, and the hippos are really fun to play as. I wasn't thinking I would have fun, but like or the elephants. It's a fast elephant.
Would have been funnier if they gave it like a Wario style shoulder charge.
That would have been funnier, although yeah, that would probably still work. I the last boss of this game is incredible. And I did not see that one coming, I'll say. The style that they decided for the final boss, this might be my favorite Bowser fight yet.
I find it interesting to see Endless Dungeon on here.
Hey, I follow my Steam recommendations.
What do you think of this, Tam?
It's surprisingly fun. So like I'm pretty mixed on endless games. Not gonna be honest. I'm not like necessarily enthusiastic about. I'm not necessarily enthusiastic about their purported universe because I don't really feel like it. I feel like the name Endless is pretty generic, and I also don't feel like it quite ties things together in a way that makes me feel like there's a added value to it. But the idea of co-op tower defense roguelike dungeon crawl is something that I have played before and enjoyed. And
Other than co-op, it's kind of something they've made before.
yeah, and they made it before, and it was fine. But also, it's the co-op feels like it would add a lot. My first impression was I played through a couple of floors, I unlocked some stuff, and was like, "This is cool. This is cool. I want to try this with some friends." And I was like, "Hey, you know what a great way to do that would be? Talk about it on the show."
Yeah, I was kind of an early tester of this game, and when I got in, their marketing around it was like leaning more towards ARPGs. So I got the wrong impression of what this game was going to be like.
I feel like I played Dungeon of the Endless, so I had a pretty good idea what this game was going to be like.
It's got ARPG DNA in it.
Yeah, but it's still heavily a tower defense game.
Yeah, it's got ARPG DNA in it the way that like a great grandchild has DNA in it.
Yeah. Like
I mean,
I think they think they're making it, but
Diablo.
Yeah, it was very tower defensey, which is fine, but like not really my thing.
I would say it's more on the twin stick shooter side, except tower defensey for areas you can't be in.
I liked the actual action combat. I disliked dealing with trying to keep the other areas under control, the tower defense aspect.
Yeah, it can quickly get overwhelming playing solo, and I feel like that's where the co-op feels really crucial, because I think it would be really, really cool to be able to split the party, as it were, and handle different sections.
Right. I think in co-op, all the things I didn't really like about it would be less so. Like I didn't like flipping between two characters, and obviously that's not going to be the case if you're playing in a co-op. I didn't like having to do zone control on different areas at the same time. But the actual combat was fine. Like, and like it does have a very, twin stick shooter type feel.
Yeah. And I liked the different characters. They seem at least somewhat interesting.
I didn't get a very good, it took me a bit to realize that this character has abilities that I can and should use.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to play with folks.
Yeah. So, I don't have a lot to say about it because I played it for an hour, but
I played it for a little more than that, enough to see the first boss, but that's about as far as I got.
Yeah. It was my inclusion of it on this week's show is purely self-serving.
So SudokuCon is a thing, and it has a date.
Well, I will say a stream to support SudokuCon has a date. It's next Saturday, and I believe Sunday. I'm actually going to be part of the SudokuCon Fundraiser stream. I will be on at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you are interested, I believe it's twitch.tv/SudokuCon. You can come hang out with me, and I will be interviewing some of like the world's best speed solvers, I believe. So that'll be interesting. I know nothing about speed solving, but I'm sure it's neat. I'll also probably be doing some Sudoku solving myself at some point. But yeah, I am trying my hand at this whole like organized marathon stream thing, and boy, that's a lot to put on. It seems like a lot of work as I watch the planning committee go on. I'm glad I just have to be there and like, talk for 4 hours.
So the thing that I've been seeing in my stream, or not my stream, but my feeds a lot this week is City Skylines 2. It looks gorgeous.
It's very pretty.
It does look very pretty.
So, oh my god, I love City Skylines. City Skylines took up the torch of SimCity and has leaned into it.
Yeah.
And City Skylines 1, basically, near as I can tell, City Skylines 2 exists because they basically needed to figure out some core systems that they did for 1 that just like limited what they were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so City Skylines 2 exists to fix all of those because they weren't able to fix them with modding. Which is nuts, but also like kind of on brand and rad.
Like, are there a bunch of official mods for City Skylines?
There's a bunch of DLC.
Not really. There's a lot of DLC.
There's a
yeah,
lot
they mostly
of
do is DLC, and then they have a jillion mods. And so it's hard to get in. It's hard to like specifically get into what City Skylines 2 is doing that's different, but like the traffic sim, parking matters.
I mean, traffic was going to be my first question. Is it less of a pain in the ass to get roads to go where you want them and traffic to do what you want?
So far, roads have more control over what you're doing with them.
Good.
And I think that's good, but it's also more, it's like placing roads is somewhat more work, but also because you have more control over it, solving traffic problems is less work.
Okay, that's what matters to me, because that's always what I would run into. Ultimately, is there's traffic congestion in places, and I've given you alternate routes. Like I've tried everything, and they won't go those places. They don't want to change lanes.
Yeah, I haven't built cities quite big enough for that to be just an absolute nightmare yet, but you can do some more interesting things with roads now. I think that traffic is less of a nightmare than it used to be. The new nightmare is parking.
I mean, that sounds like an actual city then.
Yeah. There's a lot more like individual simulation of residents, which I think weirdly helps a lot of that.
Yeah, I've heard about the fidelity of the individual simulation of residents.
I mean, they already had a first patch that added level of detail.
They have teeth, individual teeth.
Teeth.
Yeah,
that's disturbing.
Yeah, you can zoom in far enough that the game is indistinguishable from The Sims. Like, I could just keep scrolling my mouse wheel in until I'm at street level, looking into windows and reading signs of named restaurants. Like, I can zoom far enough out that I can see basically the entire map on my screen, like it's a satellite view. Their upgraded Twitter feed is hilarious. Just people tweet about what they like or don't like about your town.
Don't read Twitter.
There's a new interesting
is it still a little
thing.
blue bird? Because that doesn't.
The what?
Is the icon for the in-game Twitter equivalent? Is it still the cute little blue bird?
Yeah, it's still a cute little blue bird.
It's officially better than actual Twitter now.
I guess so. Yeah.
The radio is funnier. I think the radio was like forgettable originally. The radio is much funnier.
I mean, there is DLC for that.
I believe it.
I think there's a lot of DLC in the first game. It is a Paradox game after all.
The first game has 62 individual DLCs.
Good lord.
Because their support policy is just keep making DLC.
You know what? I support that. Like, I mean, sure, it's a little weird that all the DLC, costs like 100 times more than the original game, but whatever.
That was over the course of
Several
almost
years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so City Skylines at like all the DLC for it at full price is $400. But also, DLC goes on sale regularly. So
they have a progression system, which I think is actually really functional. At first I was like, oh my god, what? But it does a really good job of letting you focus your city in various ways, because it's basically a tech tree.
Okay.
But the city doesn't. It actually turns into this nice thing. You can unlock it. There's a whole bunch of, when you start a new game, things that you can just be like, no, give me all the tech off the bat. But you're not held accountable for the functionality of things you haven't unlocked.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about everything from the beginning.
Right.
Got it.
Your citizens do not complain about your education system until you have an education system. Until you unlocked educational systems.
Okay.
You don't have crime or fire in the city until you can build police and fire. Those sorts of things. This is somewhat weird because one of the things that you can add are stoplights. Like, stoplights are part of your tech tree. I haven't seen any problems with not building stoplights, but you sure can. I also think it's very funny that you can choose between North American or European themes for your towns, which I thought was purely aesthetic, but doesn't seem to be. My experience thus far is that in North America, on the North American theme, I think roads count as less noise pollution. And in the European theme, roundabouts do things. Like,
do things.
People understand roundabouts.
Yeah, people know how to use them.
Yeah, like my North American city, I built a roundabout and immediately started having traffic problems. Was like, all right, I'm going to remove this roundabout and put a stoplight in.
Accurate to real life.
Right. But it also affects the architecture, and they do the tutorial is actually quite good. Walks you through everything as you unlock it, and the information that it provides you is good, but also the information that you need is readily available basically all the time, which is really handy. Because I've definitely played these games where I feel like I'm struggling to make sense of what's going on.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's got some hey, what's your cash flow? What's your population? How's the weather affecting you? What is the average happiness? What's the average happiness and why? If you've got various services, what's the coverage?
Yep.
Oh, hey, these people have water, but it's not great. You can manage that. So yeah, I've been enjoying it.
You appear to be building a sandwich right now.
Yeah, they have some honestly very funny starting layouts. I would not describe any of their starting layouts as simple, but they do have a variety of this is recognizably some part of this is the Midwest. This is the Pacific Northwest. This is someplace with fjords in Europe. This is your average inland European town. This is definitely not New York. This is literally just San Francisco. So you got a bunch of choices about where you want to build. I'm not good at using the information provided to make intelligent choices about what I want to build. So,
I mean, I know in the original there was just masses and masses of information, so I can only assume there is more.
Individual houses can level up, which is interesting. I think that they really want you, the more stable your city is, the higher level the buildings get, which is good. But also, it creates this interesting tug of war between remodeling your city as needed and maintaining your high level buildings.
Well, I remember in the original game there was some tension between like you didn't want all of your stuff to be super high level because that makes the like property values higher, and there needs to be somewhere for the less affluent people to live and work and so forth.
Yeah. Otherwise, you don't get anybody moving to your city. They've got other weird little. There's like other weird little events that can happen. It's not just natural. Well, I don't know if this counts as natural disasters, but like at one point, I had a whole bunch of tech bros moving into my city.
I mean, that sounds like a natural disaster. Well, not
Did you
natural,
build San
but certainly a
Francisco?
disaster.
Well, this wasn't in San Francisco, but it was basically like right after I built a bunch of offices. I like overbuilt office space.
Oh well, yeah.
And having overbuilt office space, I basically had a bunch of like, I'm pretty sure it was a parody of Crypto Bros, but they were like, I caught them on the Twitter, the in-game Twitter equivalent, commenting about how this is the hot new place for whatever weird tech they're talking about.
Oh dear.
And like property values shot way up, and then I raised taxes to try to put some controls on that, and they all left. And I ended up with a bunch of abandoned houses, and it was like, that's really annoying. But yeah, there's a bunch of fun little details. It's also less horrific to try to start your city on green energy.
Well, that's good.
Which was definitely a problem with the old the original game. You like basically couldn't. You had to like transition to green energy later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can start on wind power. And there's definitely downsides to doing that. Like my service upkeeps are out of control, but it's fine.
So I'm looking at the other topics. That's probably a show. Any quick things or final thoughts?
There's going to be some weird events in Path of Exile soon, but we'll probably talk about those next week.
Yeah. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.